A cold wind whipped across Vera Pierce's face as the train whistle shrieked its final goodbye, the receding cars taking with them the last vestige of the life she'd known. The platform of Cottonwood Springs depot stood empty save for her single leather trunk and the dust devils dancing around her ankles. She had no name to give the station master, no address where someone might be expecting her, and no prospects in this remote corner of Arizona territory in 1881. Vera clutched her small beaded handbag against her chest, fighting the urge to run after the train like a desperate child. The letter that had brought her west the promise of marriage to a man she'd corresponded with for 8 months had proven as substantial as the dust beneath her feet. Nobody waited for her. Nobody knew her name. "Might as well tell me where you're headed, miss," the station master called from his office window. "Last stage already left for the day, but I can point you toward the boarding house." Vera opened her mouth to respond, but found no words. What could she say? That Arthur Blackwell, her intended husband, had apparently fabricated his entire existence. That the home he described in such vivid detail in his letters, the ranch with cottonwoods lining the creek and a view of distant mountains, was nowhere to be found. I don't know," she finally managed, her voice barely audible over the wind. The station master's weathered face creased with concern as he emerged from the small building. "You're the mail-order bride, ain't you, for Blackwell's place?" Vera nodded mutely. "Well, madam, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there ain't no Blackwell ranch. Never has been, not in these parts." He scratched his gray beard. "You been had, I reckon." The blood drained from her face. 8 months of correspondence. The sale of her family's modest Philadelphia home following her parents' deaths. The journey west that had depleted her savings. All for nothing. You got folks back east can wire you money. Telegraph office closes in an hour. Vera shook her head. There was no one left, no home to return to. She was truly, utterly alone. The station master's expression darkened. "Miss, I don't mean to alarm you, but a woman alone in these parts, well, it ain't safe to be without prospects." He gestured vaguely toward the dusty Main Street. "We got the Silver Dollar Saloon up yonder." "They're always looking for—" "I am not that desperate, sir," Vera interrupted, drawing herself up to her full height. Though her circumstances were dire, she would not surrender her dignity so quickly. As the station master retreated with an apologetic nod, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew Vera's attention. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the shimmer of heat rising off the hard-packed road. The rider's broad-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but his straight-backed posture and the easy way he handled his mount spoke of a man at home in the saddle. He reined his horse to a stop before the platform, and Vera found herself looking up at a face bronzed by the sun, with eyes the color of a summer storm. He couldn't have been more than 30, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. "Afternoon, Frank," he called to the station master. "Mail come in," sure did Garrett, "and something else besides." The station master nodded toward Vera. The cowboy Garrett shifted his attention to her, and Vera felt a curious flutter in her chest as those gray eyes assessed her with frank curiosity. "You waiting on someone, madam?" he asked, his voice deep and measured. Before she could answer, the station master interjected. "She's the one answering them letters from Blackwell, the one claiming to have that big spread south of town." A shadow crossed the cowboy's face. "Blackwell," he repeated, the name sounding like a curse on his lips. "There's no Blackwell here. Just a scoundrel using that name to lure unsuspecting women west." Vera's composure finally cracked. "Then I have been thoroughly deceived," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain dignified. and I find myself without resources or recourse in an unfamiliar place." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, tying his horse to the hitching post before approaching. Up close, he was taller than she'd first thought, and his eyes held a kindness that belied his rugged appearance. "What's your name, miss?" he asked gently. Vera Pierce." The words caught in her throat. The cowboy removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with a slight curl. "Garrett Holcomb," he offered. "I run the Half Moon Ranch about 5 miles south of town." He glanced at her trunk. "You got a place to stay tonight?" Vera shook her head, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "I had expected to meet him, to begin a new life." Garrett nodded thoughtfully, then turned to the station master. "Frank, can you ask your wife if Miss Pierce can stay with you folks tonight? I'll cover the expense." "Now wait just a moment," Vera protested. "I don't need charity, Mr. Holcomb. It's not charity, Miss Pierce, it's decency." He turned back to her. "You've been wronged, and I aim to help set it right. Tomorrow we can talk about what comes next." "And what exactly would come next for a woman in my position?" Vera asked, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "That's for you to decide," Garrett replied evenly. "But Cottonwood Springs needs a school teacher. Our last one left for California 2 months back. Town council's been looking ever since." "A school teacher," Vera blinked in surprise. "But I'm not." "Can you read and write?" he interrupted. "Of course, but cipher." "Yes, I was educated at." "Then you're qualified," Garrett said with a decisive nod. "More qualified than most in these parts." Frank, the station master, returned. "Martha says she's welcome. We got the spare room ready." "Thank you," Vera said softly, still stunned by this unexpected turn of events. As Frank lifted her trunk, Garrett stepped closer. "Miss Pierce," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I know your name now, and I promise you this: as long as I'm around, you won't be alone in this town." Something in his steady gaze made Vera believe him, even as logic told her to trust no one. She'd already been betrayed once. And yet, there was something about Garrett Holcomb that felt different from any man she'd ever known. "Why would you help a complete stranger?" she asked. A shadow crossed his face. "Because 5 years ago my sister answered a letter just like yours. She never came home." He placed his hat back on his head. "I'll come by tomorrow at 10 to take you to meet the town council." With that, he mounted his horse and rode away, leaving Vera to wonder if she'd just been rescued or set upon a different path to ruin. The next morning found Vera awake before dawn, watching the sky transform from inky darkness to watercolor blue through the window of Frank and Martha's spare room. She'd slept poorly, plagued by doubts and fears about her future. Martha had been kind, feeding her a hearty supper and sharing town gossip that painted Cottonwood Springs as a growing community with aspirations beyond its current status as a cattle town. According to Martha, Garrett Holcomb was well respected, a man who'd built the Half Moon from nearly nothing after returning from the war. Single, Martha had pointedly mentioned, though seemingly uninterested in the local girls. At precisely 10 o'clock, a knock came at the door. Martha answered it, and Vera heard the now familiar deep voice greeting the station master's wife. Smoothing her second-best dress, a blue calico that had seen better days, Vera steeled herself for what was to come. Garrett stood in the sitting room, hat in hand. He'd shaved and his dark hair was neatly combed. He wore a clean shirt and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. Their eyes met, and Vera was struck again by that peculiar feeling in her chest, like a bird taking flight. "Miss Pierce," he greeted her. "You ready to meet the town council?" "As ready as circumstances allow, Mr. Holcomb." She attempted a smile that felt more like a grimace. Outside, a buggy waited instead of his horse. He helped her up, his hands strong and steady at her waist. The brief contact sent a shock through her that she firmly attributed to nerves rather than his touch. As they drove down the main street, Garrett pointed out the various establishments: the general store, the assayer's office, the bank, the Silver Dollar Saloon, and finally, the small whitewashed building that served as the schoolhouse. "It's not much," he admitted, "but the town's growing. 28 children of school age. The railroad brings more families every month." "Why did the previous teacher leave?" Vera asked, taking in the modest structure. Garrett's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Miss Abernathy found herself taken with a gold prospector passing through. "Last I heard they were headed to San Francisco." Vera raised an eyebrow. "And the teacher before her married the blacksmith." Now he did smile, a transformation that softened his weathered face. "Teaching seems to be a temporary occupation around here." "I see." Vera turned her attention back to the schoolhouse, trying to imagine herself standing before rows of students. She had never taught, but she'd helped her mother with the younger students at the girls' seminary where her mother had worked. It wasn't beyond her abilities. The town council met in a room above the bank, 5 men representing the primary interests of Cottonwood Springs. Garrett introduced them. Mayor Harrison, who also owned the general store; Mr. Fletcher, the banker; Dr. Ellis; Mr. Ramsey, who owned the largest cattle operation in the area; and Pastor Wright. Vera sat straight-backed in the offered chair, answering their questions about her education and background while omitting the humiliating details of her current predicament. To her surprise, Garrett had already explained her situation to them, saving her the embarrassment. "We can offer $15 a month," Mayor Harrison said, "plus room and board at Mrs. Jenkins' boarding house. Term starts in 2 weeks, which gives you time to prepare." It was less than she might have earned back east, but the addition of lodging made it a reasonable offer, and her alternatives were few. "There's one more thing," Garrett interjected. "The schoolhouse needs repairs before winter. The roof leaks, and the stove's not drawing proper." The council members exchanged glances, and Mr. Fletcher cleared his throat. "Town treasury's a bit thin at present, after the spring floods." "I'll handle it," Garrett said firmly. "Consider it my contribution to education." Mayor Harrison nodded gratefully. "Then I believe we have an arrangement, pending Miss Pierce's acceptance." 5 pairs of eyes turned to Vera, awaiting her decision. It wasn't what she had come west for, not the home and family she'd dreamed of, but it was honest work and a chance to establish herself. "I accept," she said, and with those 2 words felt the first stirrings of control returning to her life. After the meeting, Garrett drove her to Mrs. Jenkins' boarding house, a 2-story clapboard structure with a neat garden and a wide porch. The landlady, a plump widow in her 50s, showed Vera to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. "It's the teacher's room," Mrs. Jenkins explained. "Been empty since Miss Abernathy left. Meals are at 7, noon, and 6. Sundays we have a special dinner after church." Left alone, Vera sat on the narrow bed and finally allowed herself to cry, not from despair, but from the overwhelming relief of finding a safe harbor when she'd expected to drown. Later, as she washed her face and repinned her hair, a knock came at her door. Opening it, she found Garrett standing awkwardly in the hallway. "Thought you might need these," he said, holding out several books. "From my personal library. History, mathematics, literature. Might help you prepare for teaching." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Vera accepted the books. "Thank you, Mr. Holcomb. You've been extraordinarily kind to a stranger." "Not a stranger," he corrected. "You're our new school teacher." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be by tomorrow to take you to the schoolhouse. You should see what you're working with before you start planning lessons." "That would be helpful," she agreed. He nodded, seeming about to say something more than thought better of it. "Good evening, Miss Pierce." "Good evening, Mr. Holcomb." As she closed the door, Vera wondered what it was about this man that made her feel both completely safe and utterly unsettled. The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity as Vera prepared for her new role. True to his word, Garrett arranged for the schoolhouse repairs, often working alongside the hired men himself. Vera spent hours organizing the meager supply of textbooks, creating lesson plans, and studying the books Garrett had lent her. The children of Cottonwood Springs ranged from 6 to 16 years of age, with vastly different levels of prior education. Some could barely write their names, while others had been well schooled before their families moved west. Vera decided to group them roughly by ability rather than age, creating a flexible system that would allow students to progress at their own pace. 2 days before school was to begin, Vera was writing out arithmetic problems on the newly repaired blackboard when the schoolhouse door opened. She turned, expecting to see Garrett, who had taken to stopping by each afternoon, but instead found herself facing a well-dressed woman about her own age. "So you're the new teacher," the woman said, her tone neither friendly nor hostile, merely assessing. "I'm Victoria Ramsey. My father's on the town council." "Vera Pierce," she replied, offering her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Victoria ignored the offered hand, instead walking slowly around the schoolroom, examining the modest improvements. "You've made this place almost presentable. I'm impressed." She turned back to Vera, her gaze direct. "Tell me, Miss Pierce, are you planning to follow in Miss Abernathy's footsteps and abandon your post for the first man who shows interest?" Vera stiffened. "I have no such intentions, Miss Ramsey. I came here to build a new life, and I take my responsibilities seriously." Victoria's perfectly arched eyebrow rose. "That's not what I hear. Word is you came to marry some fictional rancher and ended up stranded. Teaching seems more like a fortunate accident than a vocation." Heat rushed to Vera's cheeks. "You seem remarkably well informed about my personal affairs." "It's a small town, Miss Pierce, and some of us have lived here all our lives." Victoria smoothed her expensive skirt. "Some of us also have genuine attachments to this community and its future." Vera set down her chalk. "Is there something specific you wish to discuss, Miss Ramsey? Or did you merely come to establish your territorial rights?" A slight smile curved Victoria's lips. "Territorial rights, an interesting choice of words." "I simply wanted to meet the woman who has Garrett Holcomb playing carpenter and lending out his precious books." She moved toward the door. "He doesn't usually take such an interest in newcomers." "Mr. Holcomb has been kind enough to help me settle in," Vera replied carefully. "As have many people in town." "Indeed." Victoria paused at the doorway. "Just remember, Miss Pierce, men like Garrett are rare in these parts, men of substance, men who build things that last." Her eyes, cold as river stones, held Vera's. It would be a shame if he wasted his efforts on something or someone temporary. With that parting shot, Victoria departed, leaving Vera with the distinct impression that she'd just been warned off. That evening, as Vera sat on the boarding house porch reading one of Garrett's books, the man himself appeared, riding up on his bay gelding. He dismounted with his usual grace, tying his horse to the hitching post. "Evening, Miss Pierce," he called, removing his hat as he approached. "How are the preparations coming along?" "Very well, thank you, and the roof doesn't leak a drop." He settled into the chair beside her, his long legs stretched out before him. "Good to hear. Any problems I should know about?" Vera hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I had a visitor today." "Miss Ramsey." Garrett's expression darkened momentarily. "Victoria has opinions about most things in Cottonwood Springs, including you, apparently. he sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Victoria and I have known each other since we were children. Her father has certain expectations about her future. He looked uncomfortable. Expectations I don't share. She seemed to imply that you and she. Vera trailed off, suddenly embarrassed by her presumption. There's no understanding between us, if that's what you're asking, Garrett said firmly. Never has been. Not for lack of her father pushing the idea. Relief flooded through Vera, though she could not explain why it should matter to her whether Garrett had attachments. I worry she might make things difficult for you, he continued. Victoria can be formidable when crossed. I can handle Miss Ramsay, Vera assured him, though she wasn't entirely confident of that fact. I'm more concerned about doing right by my students. Garrett studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. You know, when you stepped off that train looking lost and betrayed, I never would have guessed you'd take to teaching with such determination. Neither would I, Vera admitted with a small laugh. But necessity is a powerful motivator. Is that all it is, necessity? He asked quietly. Vera considered the question. No, she finally said. There's something else. A desire to create something worthwhile from what began as disaster, to prove that I'm more than someone's abandoned bride. Garrett nodded slowly. I understand that feeling. He gazed out at the darkening street. After the war, coming back to nothing, you either rebuild or you break. His eyes returned to hers. You're a builder, Vera Pierce. I recognized it right away. Something in the way he said her name, the warmth and respect in his tone, made Vera's heart beat faster. They sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened into night, the first stars appearing overhead. I should go, Garrett said eventually, rising from his chair. Big day tomorrow. Cattle buyer coming from Kansas City. Of course. Vera stood as well, suddenly aware of how close they were standing on the narrow porch. Thank you again for all your help. Garrett put his hat back on but didn't immediately move to leave. There's a social at the church Saturday night. After your first week of teaching, would you allow me to escort you? The invitation caught Vera off guard. Yes, that would be lovely. His smile transformed his face again, softening the hard edges that life had carved there. Good, I'll call for you at 7. He tipped his hat and descended the porch steps. Vera watched him ride away, a curious mixture of anticipation and trepidation swirling within her. She'd come west for a new beginning, but nothing had prepared her for the unexpected path her life was taking or the unfamiliar feelings stirring in her heart. The first day of school arrived with cloudless skies and the crisp feel of early autumn. Vera stood at the schoolhouse door, welcoming each student by name, having memorized the list provided by the town council. The children arrived in groups, siblings and neighbors, some walking from outlying farms, others from homes in town. By 8 o'clock, 26 children occupied the benches, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Vera smoothed her navy blue dress, took a deep breath, and called the class to order. Good morning. I am Miss Pierce and I will be your teacher. She wrote her name on the blackboard in her neat script. Before we begin with lessons, I would like to learn more about each of you and what you hope to gain from your education. A freckled boy of about 12 raised his hand. Miss Abernathy just made us recite our letters and do sums. Are you going to be different? Vera considered the question. Yes, Thomas, I believe I will be. While letters and sums are important, there is much more to learning. I want to help each of you discover the joy of knowledge, whether that means literature, science, history, or practical skills. A girl in a faded calico dress spoke up without raising her hand. Pa says girls don't need book learning past figuring household accounts. Says it gives us ideas above our station. Murmurs of agreement came from several other girls, while some of the boys snickered. Vera's spine straightened. "And what is your name?" "Sarah Miller, madam." "Well, Sarah Miller, I respectfully disagree with your father. Education is not about staying in one station, as he puts it. It's about expanding your mind and your possibilities." Vera looked around at all the girls. "A woman with education has choices. She can teach, like me. She can keep books for a business. She can write or become a nurse or manage property. Or she can just get married and have babies," called out one of the older boys, eliciting laughter. "Yes, James Wilson, she can choose that too," Vera replied evenly. "And if she does, she'll be a better mother for being educated. She'll teach her children, manage her household wisely, and perhaps even help her husband with his business affairs." The classroom fell silent as the children contemplated this perspective. "Now," Vera continued, "I've prepared some exercises to help me determine what each of you already knows, so I can better plan our lessons. Please come forward one at a time when I call your name." By noon, Vera had a clear picture of her students' abilities and attitudes. Some, like Thomas, were bright but bored by rote learning. Others, particularly the farm children, attended sporadically and had significant gaps in their education. The older girls seemed resigned to learning just enough to be marriageable, while the older boys were mostly focused on practical mathematics they could apply to ranching or commerce. As the children filed out for the midday break, Victoria Ramsey appeared at the doorway, accompanied by a girl of about 10. "Miss Pierce," Victoria said coolly, "my cousin Rebecca has just arrived from St. Louis to live with our family. She'll be joining your class." The girl beside her had Victoria's same proud bearing, but her eyes held a sadness that spoke of recent grief. Vera smiled warmly at the child. "Welcome, Rebecca. We're delighted to have you join us." Victoria placed a protective hand on Rebecca's shoulder. "Rebecca's father, my uncle, recently passed away. Her education in St. Louis was of the highest quality, so I trust you'll be able to challenge her appropriately." "I'll certainly do my best," Vera assured her, then addressed Rebecca directly. "Would you like to stay for the afternoon session today, or would you prefer to start fresh tomorrow?" Before Rebecca could answer, Victoria interjected. "She'll start tomorrow. Today she needs to settle in." She handed Vera a leather-bound book. "Her previous coursework. You'll find she's quite advanced for her age." As Victoria ushered Rebecca away, Vera caught the girl glancing back with what looked like curiosity rather than the dismissal her cousin had displayed. The afternoon session proceeded more smoothly than the morning, as Vera had now grouped the students according to ability and set appropriate tasks for each group. By the time the final bell rang at 4 o'clock, she had a clearer vision of how to proceed with her teaching. As the schoolyard emptied, Vera remained at her desk, making notes on each student. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice the visitor until a shadow fell across her papers. "First day survive you, or did you survive it?" Garrett asked, leaning against the doorframe. Vera looked up, surprised and pleased to see him. "A bit of both, I think." He entered the classroom, looking around at the now orderly space. "Heard good things from the Peterson boys on my way in. Said you didn't whack anyone with a ruler all day, which apparently sets you apart from Miss Abernathy." "I prefer not to rule by fear," Vera replied, gathering her papers, "though I suspect my patience will be tested before the week is out." Garrett came to stand by her desk. "I brought you something." He produced a small package wrapped in brown paper, a first-day gift. Touched, Vera carefully opened the package to reveal a beautiful fountain pen with a mother-of-pearl inlay. "Mr. Holcomb, this is far too generous." "Every teacher needs a proper pen," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. And I think, after all this, you might call me Garrett." "Thank you, Garrett," she said, testing the feel of his name. "It's beautiful." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Vera felt that same curious flutter in her chest. Then the schoolhouse door banged open, breaking the spell. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Victoria Ramsey said, stepping into the room. "The devoted rancher checking on our new teacher." Her tone made the words sound far less innocent than they should have been. Garrett's expression hardened. "Victoria, what brings you back to the schoolhouse?" Rebecca forgot her handkerchief. She produced the small square of linen from her reticule, though I'm beginning to think I should have sent a servant instead. Her gaze moved meaningfully between Garrett and Vera. "Miss Ramsey, if you have concerns about my professional conduct, I suggest you raise them with the town council," Vera said firmly, rising from her desk. "Otherwise, I would appreciate if you would refrain from insinuations." Victoria's eyes narrowed. We've developed quite a backbone in just 2 weeks, haven't we? I wonder what else you've developed in that time." Garrett took a step forward. "That's enough, Victoria. Miss Pierce has done nothing to deserve your hostility. Hasn't she?" Victoria's perfect features arranged themselves into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps not intentionally, but intentions don't always matter when it comes to consequences, do they?" She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Pierce, I've decided to serve on the school board. Father arranged it this morning, so I'll be taking a very active interest in your teaching methods." After she left, Vera sank back into her chair. "I seem to have made an enemy without even trying." Garrett sighed heavily. "Victoria's issues run deeper than your arrival. Her father's empire building has made her used to getting her way in all things." He hesitated, then added, "And she's never taken well to disappointment." "You being the disappointment, I presume?" Vera asked quietly. He nodded. "William Ramsey decided years ago that joining our properties through marriage would be advantageous. Victoria, being a dutiful daughter, embraced the idea. And you didn't." "No." His gray eyes held her steadily. "I believe marriage should be about more than property lines and cattle herds." Vera found herself unable to look away from his gaze. "What should it be about then? Respect, partnership, and if you're fortunate, genuine affection." Something vulnerable flashed across his face. "Maybe even love, though that seems a rare commodity out here." "Not just out here," Vera said softly, thinking of the loveless marriages she'd witnessed in Philadelphia, unions of convenience and social climbing not so different from what William Ramsey had envisioned for his daughter. Garrett cleared his throat. "We should go. Mrs. Jenkins doesn't like her boarders to be late for supper." He offered his arm. "May I walk you home?" As they strolled through town, several people greeted them, some with friendly nods, others with curious glances. Vera realized that in a community this small, her association with Garrett wouldn't go unnoticed or unremarked upon. "Does it bother you?" she asked as they turned onto the street where the boarding house stood. "The talk that will come from you being seen with me?" Garrett considered her question. "People will always talk, Miss Pierce. The question is whether we give their words power over our actions." "Vera," she corrected him. "If I'm to call you Garrett, then you must call me Vera." His slow smile warmed her more than the afternoon sun. "Vera, then." They had reached the boarding house steps. "I'll see you Saturday evening." "Yes, 7 o'clock." He tipped his hat and left her there, his long strides carrying him quickly down the street. Vera watched him go, wondering how a man she'd known for such a short time could already feel so important to her future happiness. The rest of the week passed in a blur of lessons, adjustments, and small victories with her students. Rebecca Ramsey proved to be as advanced as her cousin had claimed, but also quiet and withdrawn. Vera made special efforts to draw her out, assigning her more challenging work and responsibilities that made her feel valued. By Friday afternoon, Vera had established routines and expectations that brought a measure of order to the diverse group. Even James Wilson, the troublemaker who'd made the comment about women getting married, had begun to show genuine interest in the geography lessons. After dismissing the children for the weekend, Vera remained at her desk, reviewing her notes and planning for the coming week. The sound of a throat clearing made her look up. Rebecca Ramsey stood in the doorway, clutching her books to her chest. "Miss Pierce, may I speak with you?" "Of course, Rebecca, come in." Vera gestured to the chair beside her desk. "Is everything all right?" The girl sat primly on the edge of the chair. "I wanted to apologize for my cousin's behavior. Victoria can be difficult." Surprised by the child's directness, Vera chose her words carefully. "That's very thoughtful of you, Rebecca, but there's no need for you to apologize for your cousin's actions." "But there is," Rebecca insisted. "She's being unkind because of Mr. Holcomb, and that's not fair to you." Her young face was serious beyond her years. "Victoria always gets what she wants. Always. But she can't make Mr. Holcomb court her, no matter how many times Uncle William invites him to dinner." "Rebecca, this isn't really an appropriate conversation, please, Miss Pierce," the girl interrupted. "I just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family is like Victoria. I think you're a wonderful teacher, and I'm glad you came to Cottonwood Springs." Touched, Vera reached out and squeezed Rebecca's hand. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." Rebecca stood to leave, then hesitated. "Miss Pierce, are you and Mr. Holcomb courting? Everyone in town is saying so." "No, we're not," Vera replied firmly. "Mr. Holcomb has been kind to me because I arrived in difficult circumstances. That's all." Rebecca's eyes, wise beyond their years, studied Vera's face. "If you say so, Miss Pierce. But Mr. Holcomb never fixed the schoolhouse roof for Miss Abernathy, and she was much prettier than—" She stopped, blushing. "I mean, he seems to care what happens to you, more than just being kind." With that observation, Rebecca hurried away, leaving Vera to ponder the child's insights. Was there truth to what Rebecca said? Did Garrett's attention stem from something more than basic decency? And more troublingly, did her own feelings run deeper than gratitude? Saturday evening arrived, and Vera found herself spending more time than usual on her appearance. She wore her best dress, a deep green silk that she'd saved for special occasions, and arranged her dark hair in a more flattering style than her usual severe bun. Mrs. Jenkins knocked on her door just before 7. "Your gentleman caller is here, Miss Pierce, and looking mighty handsome, if I might say so." Garrett waited in the parlor, dressed in a clean black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd trimmed his beard. He looked, Vera thought with a flutter in her stomach, like a different man from the dusty cowboy who had first greeted her at the train depot. His eyes widened appreciatively as she entered the room. "Miss Pierce, Vera, you look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, feeling uncharacteristically shy. "You're quite transformed yourself." He offered his arm with a slight bow. "Shall we?" The church social was held in the parish hall, a simple building adjacent to the white-steepled church. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the gathering. A small group of musicians played in the corner, and tables laden with food lined one wall. Their entrance caused a momentary lull in conversation, followed by a buzz of whispers. Vera felt numerous eyes following them as Garrett led her to greet Pastor Wright and his wife. "Miss Pierce." "Wonderful to see you in a social setting," the pastor's wife exclaimed. "I've heard such good things about your first week of teaching." "Thank you, Mrs. Wright. The children have been responsive to my methods for the most part." "And you, Garrett," Pastor Wright said, clapping him on the shoulder. Don't think we've seen you at a social since the 4th of July celebration." Garrett smiled easily. "Had to make sure our new school teacher got a proper welcome to town life." As they moved through the crowd, Vera noted the varied reactions to their pairing. Some, like the Wrights, seemed genuinely pleased. Others, particularly the mothers of marriageable daughters, watched with obvious disappointment. And in the corner, surrounded by admirers, Victoria Ramsay observed with thinly veiled displeasure. "Would you care to dance?" Garrett asked as the musicians struck up a lively tune. Vera hesitated. "I'm not very practiced at country dances." "Neither am I," he admitted. "But we can be unpracticed together." His hand on her waist was warm and strong as he guided her through the steps of a Virginia reel. Vera found herself laughing as they circled each other, her initial stiffness melting away in the joy of movement and music. When the dance ended, they were both breathless and smiling. Garrett procured cups of punch and they found a quiet corner to rest. "You're a natural," he told her, his gray eyes twinkling. "For someone unpracticed." "You exaggerate, sir," she replied, but couldn't help returning his smile. "Though I will admit, it was more enjoyable than I expected." As they talked, Vera found herself opening up about her life before coming west, her parents' deaths from influenza, the struggle to maintain their modest home, and finally, the series of letters that had given her hope for a new beginning. "I feel foolish now," she confessed. "So desperate for a future that I believed a complete stranger's promises." Garrett's expression grew serious. "There's no shame in hoping for happiness, Vera. The shame belongs to the man who exploited that hope." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever wish you'd stayed in Philadelphia?" The question gave her pause. 2 weeks ago I might have said yes, but now. She looked around at the hall filled with people who were becoming familiar, some even friendly. "Now I'm not so certain. There's something about this place, something real and unvarnished. Life here is difficult, but it's also honest in a way I never experienced in the East." Garrett nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's what kept me here after the war. I could have gone back east, tried to make a life in the cities. But there's a clarity to existence out here that gets into your blood." "Yes, exactly," Vera agreed, feeling a connection with him that transcended their brief acquaintance. "Though I imagine building a ranch from nothing required more than an appreciation for clarity." A shadow crossed his face. "It wasn't entirely from nothing. My father had the land before the war, though not much else. When I came back in '65, the house had been burned by raiders, the fences were down, and the few cattle left had gone wild." He stared into his punch cup. "Took 3 years just to get a proper roof over my head and enough stock to call it a working ranch. And now," Vera prompted gently. Pride replaced the shadow in his eyes. "Now the Half Moon runs 800 head of cattle, has the best water rights in the county, and turns a profit most years." He smiled ruefully. "Which is why William Ramsay suddenly decided I was worthy of his daughter, though he wouldn't have given me the time of day when I was rebuilding." Before Vera could respond, Victoria herself appeared before them, resplendent in a crimson dress that must have cost more than Vera's entire wardrobe. "Garrett, how lovely to see you actually participating in community events," she said, pointedly ignoring Vera. "Father was just saying how long it's been since you joined us for dinner at the ranch." "I've been busy with the fall roundup, Victoria," Garrett replied evenly. "You know how it is this time of year. Of course, though you seem to have found time for other activities." Her gaze flicked dismissively over Vera. "Miss Pierce, how are you finding your first social event in our little community? It must be quite rustic compared to Philadelphia society." "On the contrary," Vera replied with deliberate pleasantness. I find the genuine warmth here far preferable to the artifice that often characterizes Eastern gatherings. Victoria's perfect eyebrows rose fractionally. How charmingly diplomatic. Though one wonders if you'd be quite so enamored of our genuine warmth if you hadn't been so fortunate in your patrons. Garrett stiffened beside her. Victoria, Miss Ramsay, Vera interrupted, maintaining her composure. I understand your cousin Rebecca has lost her father recently. How is she adjusting to life in your home? The abrupt change of subject caught Victoria off guard. She's adapting, I suppose, though she's a rather peculiar child, too much time with books and not enough with proper feminine pursuits. I find her delightful, Vera said. She has a keen mind and a kind heart. You must be proud to have such a cousin. Victoria's expression suggested she was anything but proud. Yes, well, my father insisted on taking her in. Family obligation and all that. Speaking of Rebecca, Garrett interjected, she told me she's enjoying Miss Pierce's teaching methods. Says she's learning more than she did in her fancy St. Louis school. Victoria's smile tightened. Children are easily impressed by novelty, Garrett. Let's see if Miss Pierce's methods produce lasting results before we declare her the savior of education in Cottonwood Springs. She nodded curtly. If you'll excuse me, Judge Parker is signaling for me to join his table. As Victoria swept away, Vera released the breath she'd been holding. She truly dislikes me. She dislikes the idea of you, Garrett corrected. The reality of who you are hasn't penetrated her preconceptions yet. And what is the reality of who I am? Vera asked softly. Garrett's gaze turned thoughtful. A woman of remarkable strength. Someone who faced disaster and chose to build something new rather than break. His voice lowered. Someone who makes me wonder what might be possible. The intensity in his eyes made Vera's heart race. Before she could respond, the music changed to a slower, more intimate waltz. Would you dance with me again? He asked, offering his hand. As they moved together on the dance floor, Vera was acutely conscious of his hand at her waist, the slight pressure of his fingers against hers, the way his breath stirred the hair near her temple. They danced in silence, each lost in private thoughts, yet connected by something neither was ready to name. When the music ended, Garrett didn't immediately release her. Would you like to step outside for some air? He asked, his voice husky. The night air was cool and crisp, stars blazing overhead in a way Vera had never seen in the city. They walked to a small garden behind the church, where a bench sat beneath an ancient cottonwood tree. I've been meaning to ask, Vera said as they sat side by side, about the man who wrote to me. You seem to know of him, or the scheme, at least. Garrett nodded grimly. There have been 3 mail-order brides arrive in Cottonwood Springs in the past year, all for the same fictional rancher, though he used different names. Arthur Blackwell was just the latest. What happened to the others? His jaw tightened. One went back east when she had enough money, one married a widower from the next county over, and one, he hesitated. One ended up working at the Silver Dollar. Vera understood his meaning immediately. How terrible. The law can't do much, Garrett continued. There's no crime in writing letters, even deceitful ones, and the money changes hands back east before the women even arrive here. But why? What does the scammer gain? Garrett shrugged. Money primarily. The women pay for their own passage west, thinking they're coming to security. By the time they realize they've been duped, the scammer has moved on to the next town, the next scheme. And no one has any idea who's behind it. Sheriff has his suspicions, but nothing concrete. Garrett's expression darkened. I have my own theories. Is that why you helped me? Because of what happened to the others? Vera asked, needing to understand his motivations. Garrett was silent for a long moment. Partly, he finally admitted. I told you about my sister, how she answered a letter like yours. You said she never came home. She was 18, headstrong, believed she was in love with a man she'd never met. Pain etched his features. I got word 2 years later that she'd died in a mining camp in Colorado. Influenza, they said, but who knows the truth? Vera placed her hand over his. I'm so sorry, Garrett. He turned his hand to clasp hers. When I saw you standing on that platform, looking lost but still holding yourself with such dignity, I couldn't just walk away. His eyes met hers in the moonlight, but my reasons for helping you have changed since then. How so? She asked, barely above a whisper. At first, it was about doing what was right, making sure you had options, safety. His thumb traced gentle patterns on her palm. Now it's about wanting to be part of your future, not just your rescue. Vera's breath caught. Garrett, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know it's soon. Too soon, probably, and you've had enough of men making promises. He released her hand and stood. I just wanted you to know that my interest in you goes beyond duty or charity. As they walked back to the church hall, Vera's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Garrett's honesty touched her deeply, but she'd been burned by premature trust before. Yet everything about him felt different from the faceless correspondent who had lured her west with empty promises. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of dances, conversations, and stolen glances. By the time Garrett escorted her back to the boarding house, Vera had come to a decision. On the porch, beneath the soft glow of the lantern, she turned to face him. I appreciate your honesty earlier about your feelings. He nodded, his expression guarded. I meant what I said. There's no pressure, no expectation. I know. Vera took a deep breath. And that's part of why I feel I can trust you. You've never asked for anything in return for your kindness. I would never, I know that too, she smiled softly, which is why I'd like to accept your invitation. Confusion crossed his face. My invitation. To be part of my future, Vera clarified, her heart pounding. Not as my rescuer, but as something more. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a warmth that made her pulse quicken. Are you certain? I don't want you to feel obligated. I'm certain that I want to know you better, Garrett Holcomb. Vera stepped closer to him. The rest we'll discover together. He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to withdraw, and touched her cheek with gentle fingers. May I call on you properly then? Court you as you deserve to be courted. Yes, she whispered, under the October stars, with the scent of autumn in the air. Garrett bent his head and placed a tender kiss on her lips, a promise more genuine than any letter could have conveyed. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm both comforting and exhilarating for Vera. Her days were filled with teaching, a vocation she found increasingly rewarding as her students responded to her methods. Her evenings often included Garrett, who rode into town 3 or 4 times a week to see her. Their courtship progressed with a deliberate pace that suited them both. Sometimes they simply walked through town, talking about their days. Other times, Garrett brought her books from his collection or little gifts that showed his attentiveness: wildflowers pressed between paper, a silk ribbon for her hair, a carved wooden box for her desk. On Sundays after church, weather permitting, they would ride in his buggy to the countryside surrounding Cottonwood Springs. During these outings, Vera learned about the land and its seasons, while Garrett learned about her dreams and fears. I never thought I'd find contentment here, she told him one crisp November afternoon as they sat beside a small creek on Garrett's property. When I realized I'd been deceived, I thought my life was over before it had truly begun. Garrett reached for her hand, an increasingly familiar gesture that never failed to warm her. And now I can't imagine being anywhere else. She gazed at the golden cottonwood leaves drifting down around them. I love teaching the children, I love watching them grow and change. And I love, she stopped, suddenly self-conscious. What else do you love, Vera? He prompted gently. She turned to face him fully. I love the way you look at me as if I'm something precious. I love your patience and your strength. I love the life you've built here through sheer determination. Her voice softened. I think I may be falling in love with you, Garrett Holcomb. Joy transformed his face. I know I've fallen in love with you, Vera Pierce. Have been since that day at the schoolhouse when you stood up to Victoria with such quiet dignity. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I never expected to find you, but now that I have, I can't imagine my future without you in it. Their kiss was deeper than the chaste ones they'd shared before, filled with newfound certainty and growing desire. When they broke apart, both were breathing unevenly. I should take you back, Garrett said reluctantly, before I forget myself completely. Vera nodded, though part of her wished they could remain in this perfect moment forever. As autumn deepened into winter, their relationship continued to flourish, even as Victoria Ramsey's animosity grew more pronounced. As the newest member of the school board, she took every opportunity to challenge Vera's teaching methods, question her expenditures, and generally make her position more difficult. She's looking for any excuse to have you removed, Martha warned one evening after Victoria had made a surprise inspection of the schoolhouse and found fault with everything from the arrangement of desks to the selection of reading materials. She won't find one, Vera replied firmly. I'm too careful, and the children are thriving. Even the parents who were initially skeptical are pleased with their progress. December brought the first heavy snowfall and preparations for the Christmas pageant. The entire town threw itself into the celebration, with the schoolchildren practicing a nativity play and carols under Vera's direction. 2 weeks before Christmas, as Vera was working late at the schoolhouse, the door opened to admit a snow-dusted Garrett. His face was unusually serious. I need to talk to you, he said without preamble. William Ramsey came to see me today. Vera set down her pen. About Victoria, indirectly. Garrett removed his hat, turning it in his hands. He made me an offer, water rights to the North pasture land I've been trying to acquire for years, plus a substantial cash sum. In exchange for what? Vera asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. In exchange for ending my relationship with you and considering Victoria's suit favorably, as he put it. A cold feeling spread through Vera's chest. I see. Garrett crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her chair. No, I don't think you do. I told him he could keep his water and his money. I told him that what I feel for you isn't something that can be bought or sold. Relief flooded through her, followed by concern. Garrett, those water rights are important for the ranch's future. You're more important. He took her hands in his. Vera, I've been waiting for the right moment, but maybe there isn't one. Maybe there's just now and us and what we feel for each other. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. This was my mother's. I've kept it all these years, thinking I might never have cause to use it. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. Vera Pierce, will you marry me? Not because of Ramsey's threats or Victoria's schemes, but because I love you and want to build a life with you. Tears filled Vera's eyes. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Vera felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way she hadn't experienced since before her parents' deaths. What had begun as disaster had transformed into something beautiful, a future brighter than any she could have imagined. News of their engagement spread quickly through Cottonwood Springs, eliciting varied reactions. Many in town offered genuine congratulations. Mrs. Jenkins wept happy tears. Pastor Wright promised to perform the ceremony whenever they chose. Even some of Vera's students brought small gifts or handmade cards to express their excitement. Victoria's reaction was predictably less enthusiastic. The morning after the engagement became public knowledge, she arrived at the schoolhouse before classes began, her face set in rigid lines. "So you've succeeded where so many others failed," she said without greeting. "You've managed to secure the most eligible bachelor in the county after being here barely 3 months." Vera looked up from her lesson preparations. "Good morning to you too, Miss Ramsey. Do you really think this will last?" Victoria moved to the center of the room, her expensive wool cloak swirling around her. "Garrett Holcomb may be infatuated now, but he's a man of substance. Eventually, he'll realize he needs a wife who understands his world, who can help him advance his interests." "You mean someone like you," Vera said evenly. "Precisely. Someone with connections, with breeding, with an understanding of the social requirements of his position." Vera set down her chalk. "Is that truly what you think Garrett wants? Status and connections?" For a moment, Victoria's perfect composure slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "It's what he needs, whether he recognizes it or not." "What he needs," Vera said gently, "is what we all need to be loved for who he is, not for what he represents or possesses." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "How charmingly naive. This isn't a romance novel, Miss Pierce. This is the real world where marriages are alliances, not fairy tales." "I'm sorry you believe that," Vera replied, genuinely pitying the other woman. "But Garrett and I have made our choice, and I hope someday you'll find someone who makes you question your cynicism." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "This isn't over. My father doesn't accept defeat so easily, and neither do I." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and in case you're wondering, I'll be requesting a review of your position for the spring term. The school board will need to determine if a married woman can adequately fulfill teaching duties." After she left, Vera sat at her desk, troubled not by Victoria's threats, which she had expected, but by the glimpse of genuine pain she'd seen in the other woman's eyes. Behind Victoria's haughty exterior lurked someone who'd been raised to view marriage as a business transaction rather than a matter of the heart. That evening, when she related the conversation to Garrett as they sat before the fire in Mrs. Jenkins' parlor, he nodded thoughtfully. "Victoria's never known anything different," he said. "Her mother died when she was young, and William raised her to be the perfect asset for his ambitions. Everything in that household is measured by its value to the Ramsey empire." "Even Rebecca?" Vera asked, thinking of the quiet, bookish child. "Especially Rebecca. William took her in because it looks good to the community, not out of familial affection." Garrett's expression darkened. "The girl's father left her a substantial inheritance, which William now controls as her guardian. I'd wager that's the real reason he was so eager to welcome his orphaned niece." Vera's heart ached for the child. "No wonder she seems so lonely. She's just another acquisition to them." "Which is why your attention means so much to her," Garrett said, squeezing Vera's hand. "You see her as a person, not a possession." As they discussed wedding plans, a simple ceremony in the spring, after the worst of winter had passed, Vera found herself increasingly troubled by thoughts of Rebecca's situation. The girl was blossoming under her teaching, showing remarkable aptitude for literature and mathematics, but remained withdrawn in social situations. The Christmas pageant provided an unexpected opportunity. When the girl playing Mary fell ill 2 days before the performance, Vera asked Rebecca to step into the role. "Me?" Rebecca's eyes widened in alarm. "But I can't. I've never." "You know all the lines I've heard you practicing with the other girls," Vera encouraged. and you have a natural dignity that's perfect for Mary. Cousin Victoria says I should avoid drawing attention to myself, Rebecca protested weakly. She says it's unbecoming for a young lady to seek the spotlight. This isn't seeking the spotlight, Rebecca. This is helping your classmates and your community when they need you. Vera knelt to look the girl in the eyes. And between us, I think you would make a wonderful Mary. After a moment's hesitation, Rebecca nodded. I'll do it, but Cousin Victoria won't be pleased. Leave Cousin Victoria to me, Vera assured her. The night of the pageant, the church was packed with nearly every resident of Cottonwood Springs. Garrett sat in the front pew, his proud smile warming Vera as she directed the children in their performances. When Rebecca stepped onto the makeshift stage, her natural grace and clear voice brought a hush over the audience. Even Victoria, sitting stiffly beside her father, seemed impressed despite herself. After the final carol, as townspeople mingled and congratulated the children, William Ramsey approached Vera, Victoria hovering at his elbow. Interesting choice, putting Rebecca in such a prominent role, he said, his voice as cold and precise as his appearance. I wasn't consulted on this decision. Before Vera could respond, Rebecca herself appeared at her side. It was my decision, Uncle William, she said with quiet determination. Miss Pierce asked me to help and I wanted to do it. William's eyebrows rose fractionally. Indeed. Well, you acquitted yourself adequately, I suppose, though in future I expect to be informed of such things beforehand. Yes, Uncle William. Rebecca's shoulders slumped slightly. Actually, Mr. Ramsey, Vera interjected, as Rebecca's teacher, I make decisions regarding her participation in school activities. If you have concerns, you're welcome to discuss them with me directly. William's eyes, the same cold blue as Victoria's, assessed Vera with new interest. You're either very brave or very foolish, Miss Pierce. Most people in this town know better than to challenge me. I'm neither brave nor foolish, Mr. Ramsey. I'm simply doing my job advocating for the educational well-being of all my students, including your niece. A hard smile crossed his face. I see why Garrett is taken with you. You have spirit. He glanced across the room to where Garrett was deep in conversation with Pastor Wright. A pity it's being wasted on a man who lacks vision. On the contrary, Vera replied evenly, Garrett's vision built a thriving ranch from ruins. I'd say that demonstrates considerable foresight. William's smile didn't falter. Building a ranch is one thing, building a legacy is quite another. He placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Come, Victoria, we've made our appearance. Rebecca, you may join us or return to the boarding house with Mrs. Jenkins. I'd like to stay a while longer if I may, Uncle, Rebecca said, her eyes pleading. After a moment's consideration, William nodded curtly. Very well. But no later than 9 o'clock. As the Ramseys departed, Rebecca turned to Vera with shining eyes. Thank you, Miss Pierce, for everything. You were wonderful, Rebecca, truly. The girl's smile faded. Uncle William doesn't care about that. He only cares about controlling everything and everyone. She glanced toward the door through which her relatives had disappeared. He's still angry about you and Mr. Holcomb. I heard him and Victoria talking. They're planning something, but I don't know what. Vera felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December night. Don't worry about that now. Tonight is for celebration. But as she rejoined Garrett, Vera couldn't shake the feeling that William Ramsey's apparent acceptance of their engagement was merely the calm before a storm. The storm broke 2 days before Christmas. Vera was leaving the schoolhouse, arms full of student compositions to grade over the holiday when Sheriff Davis appeared before her. Evening, Miss Pierce. Need a word with you. Something in his tone made her stomach tighten. Of course, Sheriff. Is something wrong? Got a wire from back east, Philadelphia. He withdrew a folded paper from his pocket. "Seems someone there is mighty interested in your whereabouts." Vera set her papers on the schoolhouse steps. "Who would be looking for me? I have no family left." "Says here he's a Mr. Edmund Pierce, claims to be your husband." The world tilted beneath Vera's feet. "That's impossible. I've never been married." Sheriff Davis studied her face. "That's what I figured, but figured I should ask directly. Sheriff, I assure you this is some kind of mistake." Or, a horrible thought occurred to her, or another scheme like the one that brought me here. Reckon so. The sheriff nodded. "Especially since this wire came right after William Ramsey sent one east. Timing's too neat to be coincidence." "William Ramsey," Vera's voice rose in disbelief. "He's behind this. Can't prove it, but seems likely. Man like Ramsey has connections everywhere. Wouldn't be hard for him to find someone willing to cause trouble for a price." Sheriff Davis folded the paper and returned it to his pocket. "Just wanted to warn you. If this Edmund fella shows up, we'll sort it out." "Thank you, Sheriff." Vera's mind raced. "Does Garrett know?" "Not yet. Figured you should hear it first." After the sheriff left, Vera gathered her papers with shaking hands. The audacity of the scheme to invent a husband for her was both absurd and terrifying. If William Ramsey was willing to go to such lengths to prevent her marriage to Garrett, what else might he attempt? That evening, when Garrett called at the boarding house, Vera related the sheriff's visit. His reaction was controlled fury. "William's gone too far this time," he said, pacing Mrs. Jenkins' parlor. "Interfering in business matters is one thing. Trying to ruin your reputation is another entirely." "What can we do?" Vera asked. "If this man, this Edmund Pierce, actually comes to Cottonwood Springs claiming to be my husband, it will be his word against mine." "No," Garrett said firmly. "It won't come to that. I won't let it." He stopped pacing and knelt before her chair. "Vera, I know we plan to wait until spring, but I think we should marry now, as soon as possible." "Now, before Christmas," he nodded. "If we're already married when this impostor arrives, if he arrives, his claims will hold even less water." He took her hands in his. "Unless you'd rather wait." Vera thought of the simple spring ceremony they'd planned, with flowers and new dresses and the whole town in attendance. But she also thought of the determination in William Ramsey's eyes and the lengths to which he'd already gone to prevent their union. "No," she decided. "I don't want to wait. Not if it means giving William Ramsey more time to interfere in our lives." Garrett's relief was palpable. "I'll speak to Pastor Wright tonight. We could be married as early as tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Vera laughed despite the seriousness of the situation. "Garrett Holcomb, you don't waste time once your mind is made up." "Not when it comes to you," he replied, his gray eyes intense. "I've wasted enough years alone." The following day, in a simple ceremony witnessed only by Pastor and Mrs. Wright, Frank and Martha from the depot, and, surprisingly, Rebecca Ramsey, who had slipped away from her cousin's supervision, Vera Pierce became Vera Holcomb. "I promise to cherish you all the days of my life," Garrett said as he slipped his mother's ring, now joined by a simple gold band, onto her finger. "To build with you, dream with you, and face whatever comes together." "And I promise to stand beside you through all seasons," Vera replied, her voice steady despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "To make a home with you, not just of timber and stone, but of love and trust." Their kiss sealed the vows, a promise more binding than any legal document, a commitment deeper than either had dared hope for when fate had first brought them together at the train depot. After a brief celebration at the boarding house, where Martha had prepared a special dinner, Garrett took Vera home to the Half Moon Ranch. The house was larger than she'd expected, a solid two-story structure built of timber and local stone. A wide porch wrapped around three sides, and large windows faced the distant mountains. It's beautiful, she breathed as he carried her across the threshold. It's been just a house until now, Garrett replied, setting her gently on her feet in the entryway. With you here, it becomes a home. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and Vera saw evidence of careful preparation: fresh curtains at the windows, a vase of winter greenery on the dining table, new quilts on the furniture. When did you do all this? She asked, trailing her fingers over the polished surface of a cherry wood sideboard. Been working on it since I first knew I wanted to marry you, Garrett admitted. Wanted it to be ready whenever the time came. He looked suddenly uncertain. Is it all right? I know it's not as fine as what you might have had back east. It's perfect, Vera assured him, moving into his arms. Absolutely perfect. That night, as snow fell softly outside their bedroom window, they discovered each other fully for the first time, tentative at first, then with growing confidence as passion and tenderness intertwined. In Garrett's gentle hands and reverent gaze, Vera found a completion she'd never known was possible, a connection that transcended the physical act to touch something profound within her soul. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled across their bed, Vera felt a peace that defied description. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whether from William Ramsey or the harsh realities of frontier life, they would face them together. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Holcomb, Garrett murmured against her hair as the clock downstairs struck midnight. Merry Christmas, Mr. Holcomb, she replied, nestling closer to his warmth. The first of many. The supposed Edmund Pierce arrived in Cottonwood Springs 3 days after Christmas, stepping off the afternoon train in expensive Eastern attire entirely unsuited to Arizona territory. Sheriff Davis met him at the depot, along with Garrett and Pastor Wright. I understand my wife is living in this town, the man said, his disdainful gaze sweeping the main street. I've come to reclaim her. Your wife? Sheriff Davis raised an eyebrow. And what might her name be? Vera Pierce, of course, though I understand she's been using her maiden name. That's so, the sheriff scratched his chin. Funny thing about that, we don't have a Vera Pierce in Cottonwood Springs anymore. The man's confidence wavered slightly. She's here. I have reliable information. Oh, Vera's here all right, Garrett interjected, stepping forward. But her name is Vera Holcomb now. My wife. Color drained from the impostor's face. That's impossible. She's already married to me. Interesting claim, Pastor Wright said mildly. Given that I performed Mrs. Holcomb's first and only marriage ceremony 5 days ago, with proper documentation filed with the territorial authority. There must be some mistake, the man insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Only mistake was you taking William Ramsey's money to perpetrate fraud, Sheriff Davis said, moving closer. Which is a crime in Arizona territory. Mr. What was your name again? Pierce. Edmund Pierce. Funny thing about that too, the sheriff continued. Got another wire yesterday from the real Edmund Pierce, Vera's second cousin, lives in Boston. Says he's never been west of the Mississippi and has no claim on any woman named Vera. The impostor's face hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. Sheriff Davis placed a hand on the man's shoulder. Now, you got 2 choices. Get back on that train and never show your face in this town again, or spend the night in my jail while I sort out exactly what charges to file. For a moment, it seemed the man might choose defiance. Then, with a bitter glance at Garrett, he turned back toward the train. This isn't worth the trouble. One more thing, Garrett called after him. Tell William Ramsey that if he ever threatens my wife again with false husbands or any other scheme, he'll answer directly to me. As the train pulled away, carrying the impostor back toward whatever city had spawned him, Garrett felt a mixture of satisfaction and lingering concern. William Ramsey wasn't a man who accepted defeat easily. "Think he'll try something else?" Sheriff Davis asked, voicing Garrett's thoughts. "Probably," Garrett admitted, "but we'll be ready." True to Garrett's prediction, William Ramsey's next move came swiftly. The day school resumed after the Christmas holiday, Victoria appeared at the schoolhouse with the rest of the school board in tow. "Mrs. Holcomb," she said, emphasizing Vera's new name with barely concealed contempt. "The board has convened an emergency session to discuss your continued employment." Vera stood before her classroom of attentive students, conscious of their curious gazes shifting between her and the delegation. "Perhaps this discussion could wait until after the school day, Miss Ramsey." "I'm afraid not." Victoria produced an official-looking document. "This requires immediate attention." Reluctantly, Vera asked her oldest student to supervise the class and stepped outside with the board members. Mayor Harrison looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Holcomb, there's been a complaint filed regarding your moral character." "My moral character?" Vera repeated in disbelief. "Yes," Victoria interjected smoothly. "It seems that prior to your hasty marriage, you were entertaining a gentleman caller without proper chaperonage. On multiple occasions." "You mean my husband," Vera clarified. "The man I was openly courting with the full knowledge of Mrs. Jenkins and half the town." "Nevertheless," Victoria continued, "the standards for our schoolteacher must be beyond reproach. The example you set for impressionable young minds, that's quite enough, Victoria." Mayor Harrison interrupted her with uncharacteristic firmness. "Mrs. Holcomb's conduct has been exemplary, both as a teacher and as a member of our community." He turned to Vera. "I apologize for this disruption. The board has reviewed the complaint and found it without merit." Victoria's perfect composure cracked. "Father promised." "Your father doesn't control the school board, Miss Ramsey," Mr. Fletcher, the banker, interjected. "Not anymore. Times are changing, even in Cottonwood Springs." The rejection of Victoria's scheme represented a turning point in the town's relationship with the powerful Ramsey family. Though William maintained his economic influence, his social dominance began to wane as more townspeople found the courage to stand against his more unreasonable demands. For Vera and Garrett, the winter months passed in a haze of newlywed bliss and hard work. While Vera continued teaching, she also embraced her role as the mistress of Half Moon Ranch. Under Martha Jenkins' tutelage, she learned to manage the large kitchen, preserve food for the coming year, and navigate the complexities of running a household that sometimes included ranch hands as well as family. Garrett, for his part, threw himself into preparing the ranch for spring, repairing equipment, mending fences, and planning for the calving season. At night, they would sit before the fire, sharing the events of their day, reading aloud from favorite books, or simply enjoying the quiet companionship that had become the foundation of their marriage. In February, Rebecca Ramsey began spending weekends at the Half Moon, ostensibly to receive extra tutoring from Vera, but in reality to escape the oppressive atmosphere of the Ramsey household. The girl blossomed in the warmth of the Holcombs' home, revealing a quick wit and gentle humor that had been suppressed by her relatives' rigid expectations. "Why can't I live here all the time?" she asked one Sunday evening as Garrett taught her to play chess by the fire. "Uncle William hardly notices I'm there anyway, except when he wants to show me off to visitors." Vera and Garrett exchanged concerned glances. They discussed Rebecca's situation many times, troubled by her unhappiness, but constrained by William's legal guardianship. "Your uncle is your legal guardian, Rebecca," Vera explained gently. "Until you come of age, he has the right to determine where you live." "But I hate it there," Rebecca insisted, her voice rising. Victoria treats me like a burden, and Uncle William only cares about my inheritance. He made me sign papers last week that I didn't even understand. Garrett's expression darkened. What kind of papers? Something about transferring assets. He said it was routine, that as my guardian he needed authority to manage my affairs. Tears filled the girl's eyes. When I asked questions, he got angry and said I was being ungrateful after all he's done for me. Rebecca, Garrett said carefully, do you remember exactly what the document said? It's important. The girl shook her head. Not exactly. But there was something about the mining stocks my father left me. Uncle William said they weren't performing well and needed to be converted to more stable investments. Vera and Garrett shared another look, this one laden with understanding. William was likely attempting to transfer Rebecca's inheritance to his own control, perhaps permanently. I'll speak to Judge Parker tomorrow, Garrett decided. There may be something we can do legally to protect your interests, Rebecca. The girl's face brightened. Could I really come live with you? Even part of the time. We'll do our best, Vera promised, though she knew the battle ahead would not be easily won. The confrontation with William Ramsey came sooner than expected. The very next day, as Vera was dismissing her students, William himself appeared at the schoolhouse door, his expression thunderous. Mrs. Holcomb, he said without preamble, I understand you and your husband have been interfering in my family affairs. Vera dismissed the last lingering children with a gesture. If you're referring to Rebecca, Mr. Ramsey, we're simply concerned for her welfare. Her welfare is my concern, not yours. She is my ward under my protection. Is that what you call it, protection? Vera moved to stand behind her desk, needing the barrier between them. Or is it exploitation? We know about the mining stocks, Mr. Ramsey. A flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps anger, crossed his face. What Rebecca told you was a childish misunderstanding. The stocks are being properly managed for her future benefit. By transferring them to your name, Vera challenged, Judge Parker might have a different interpretation of proper management. William's expression hardened. Judge Parker is a reasonable man who understands the complexities of financial matters, unlike school teachers who should mind their own business. Rebecca is my business, Mr. Ramsey. She's my student and she's suffering under your protection. Careful, Mrs. Holcomb. William's voice dropped to a dangerous pitch. You're new to Cottonwood Springs. You don't understand how things work here. People who cross me tend to regret it. Is that a threat? Merely an observation. He adjusted his expensive coat. Rebecca will no longer be attending your school. I've arranged for a private tutor more suited to her station, and she will not be visiting your ranch again. Vera's heart sank at the thought of Rebecca isolated even further. She needs friends, Mr. Ramsey, companionship, a sense of belonging. What she needs is to remember her place and her obligations to her family. William turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mrs. Holcomb, I'd be careful about making accusations regarding Rebecca's inheritance. Slander is a serious offense, especially when directed at a man of my standing. After he left, Vera sank into her chair, troubled but not defeated. That evening, when she related the confrontation to Garrett, his jaw tightened with determination. We're not giving up, he declared. Rebecca deserves better, and William Ramsey needs to learn he can't bully everyone into submission. Over the next weeks, a careful legal battle unfolded. Judge Parker, while not immune to William's influence, was concerned enough about Rebecca's situation to appoint an independent examiner to review the guardianship arrangements. Meanwhile, Rebecca herself was indeed withdrawn from school and virtually imprisoned in the Ramsey house. Her only contact with the outside world, the letters she managed to smuggle to Vera through a sympathetic kitchen maid. As winter reluctantly yielded to spring, another unexpected development arose. Vera, who had been experiencing unusual fatigue and morning sickness, confirmed with Dr. Ellis what she had begun to suspect. She was expecting a child. "Are you certain?" Garrett asked when she shared the news, his face a study in wonderment and alarm. "Dr. Ellis says I'm about 3 months along. The baby should arrive in late August or early September." Vera placed her hand over her still flat abdomen. "Are you pleased?" In answer, Garrett gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the most precious porcelain. "Please doesn't begin to cover it," he whispered against her hair. Terrified, exhilarated, humbled, all of those at once. That night, as they lay in bed discussing names and plans for the nursery, Vera felt Garrett's hand tighten around hers. "I want Rebecca safe before the baby comes," he said quietly. "I can't bear the thought of her trapped in that house while we celebrate our child's arrival." "We'll find a way," Vera assured him, though privately she wondered how they could outmaneuver a man as powerful and determined as William Ramsey. The opportunity came in April, from an unexpected quarter. Victoria Ramsey herself appeared at the Half Moon Ranch one afternoon while Garrett was in town and Vera was preparing seeds for the kitchen garden. "Mrs. Holcomb," Victoria called from horseback, her perfect posture and elegant riding habit in stark contrast to Vera's simple work dress and soil-stained hands. "Might I have a word?" Surprised, Vera invited her inside, where Victoria declined refreshments and came directly to the point. "I want to discuss Rebecca," she said, her usual haughty manner tempered by what appeared to be genuine concern. "Father has gone too far this time." "What do you mean?" Vera asked cautiously. Victoria paced the sitting room, clearly agitated. "He's arranged a marriage for her." "To Marcus Whitfield." Marcus Whitfield, the banker from Prescott. Vera recalled the man from a town council meeting a widower at least 30 years Rebecca's senior. "But she's only 11. The marriage wouldn't take place until she's 16, Victoria clarified. "But the contract would be signed now, binding her to him." "That's barbaric," Vera exclaimed, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach in a protective gesture. "Why would your father do such a thing?" Victoria's perfect composure cracked slightly. "Because Whitfield controls the territorial bank that holds most of Father's debts. The marriage would cement their alliance and ensure favorable terms." She stopped pacing and faced Vera directly. "I've stood by while Father manipulated and controlled most aspects of our lives. I even accepted his interference in my own personal affairs." A flicker of something like regret crossed her face. "But Rebecca is a child. She deserves better than to be sold to secure Father's financial future." Vera studied the woman before her, seeing beyond the polished exterior to the conflicted human beneath. "Why come to me with this? You've made your feelings about me quite clear." "Because you're the only ones who have shown genuine concern for Rebecca's welfare." Victoria's admission seemed to cost her. "And because, despite our differences, I believe you would act in her best interest, not your own." "What are you suggesting?" Vera asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Help her escape, before the contract is signed next week." Victoria withdrew an envelope from her reticule. "These are copies of Father's guardianship papers and Rebecca's inheritance documents. They prove he's been systematically transferring her assets to his own accounts." She placed the envelope on the table between them. "Judge Parker might find these persuasive." Vera hesitated, reluctant to trust the woman who had tried to destroy her reputation and marriage. "Why not take these to the judge yourself?" "Because Father would disown me," Victoria replied with unexpected honesty. "Everything I have, my position, my security, comes from him. I'm not as brave as you, Mrs. Holcomb. I can help Rebecca, but only from the shadows. The admission cost Victoria visibly, her perfect poise faltering for the first time since Vera had known her. In that moment, Vera glimpsed the extent of William Ramsey's control over his daughter, a control nearly as absolute as what he sought to exert over Rebecca. "I'll help her," Vera promised. "But Victoria, you deserve better too. You deserve a life of your own choosing." Something like a genuine smile briefly transformed Victoria's face. "Perhaps someday. For now, saving Rebecca is enough." She moved toward the door. "Father is taking Rebecca to Phoenix on Friday to meet with Whitfield. They'll stay overnight at the Grand Hotel. That would be your best opportunity." After Victoria departed, Vera sat for a long time, pondering the unexpected alliance and the risks of what they were contemplating. When Garrett returned, she shared Victoria's information and the envelope of documents. "Could be a trap," he said, examining the papers with a suspicious eye. "Victoria hasn't exactly proven herself trustworthy." "I don't think it is," Vera replied. "You didn't see her face, Garrett. Whatever her feelings about us, she genuinely cares for Rebecca." Garrett studied the documents more closely. These would certainly interest Judge Parker. William's been siphoning off Rebecca's inheritance for years, using legal loopholes and his position as guardian. He looked up, determination in his eyes. "We need to act before he can finalize this marriage contract." The plan they devised was simple but risky. Garrett would travel to Phoenix, ostensibly on ranch business. He would locate Rebecca at the Grand Hotel and spirit her away to Prescott, where Judge Parker kept a second office. With the evidence of William's financial manipulations and Rebecca's own testimony, they hoped to convince the judge to revoke William's guardianship. "What about you?" Garrett asked as they finalized the details. "I don't like leaving you alone, especially now." His hand rested protectively over hers on her slightly rounded belly. "I'll be fine," Vera assured him. "Martha Jenkins will stay with me, and Frank will check in regularly. No one will even know what we're planning until you're safely in Prescott with Rebecca." The day of William and Rebecca's departure for Phoenix dawned clear and warm. Vera stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching as Garrett loaded his saddlebags for the journey. "Be careful," she urged, straightening his collar in a gesture that had become habitual. "William Ramsey is a dangerous man." "I will," Garrett promised, drawing her into his arms for a lingering kiss. "I'll send a telegram as soon as we're safely with Judge Parker." As Vera watched him ride away, she felt a mixture of hope and trepidation. If they succeeded, Rebecca would finally have the chance for happiness she deserved. If they failed, Vera refused to dwell on failure. Instead, she channeled her energy into preparing a room for Rebecca, assuming Judge Parker would grant them temporary guardianship while permanent arrangements were considered. The small bedroom adjacent to the nursery would be perfect, she decided, airing it thoroughly and adding cheerful curtains and a colorful quilt. The day passed slowly, with Martha Jenkins providing companionship and practical help with household tasks. As evening approached, Vera found herself growing increasingly anxious, knowing Garrett must have reached Phoenix by now. "He'll be fine," Martha assured her, serving tea in the kitchen. "Garrett Holcomb is the most capable man I know next to my Frank." "I know," Vera replied, absently stirring her tea. "It's just that William has so much power and influence. If he catches Garrett trying to take Rebecca, then Garrett will handle it," Martha said firmly. "That man didn't survive the war and rebuild this ranch from nothing by being easily defeated." A knock at the door startled them both. Martha rose to answer it, returning moments later with Sheriff Davis. "Evening, Mrs. Holcomb," he greeted her, hat in hand. "Got a telegram for you from Garrett. Asked me to deliver it personally." Vera's hand trembled slightly as she opened the message. Have Rebecca, heading to Prescott. All well. Love G. Relief flooded through her. The first part of their plan had succeeded. Now they needed Judge Parker to act on the evidence. Good news. Sheriff Davis inquired, declining Martha's offer of tea. Yes, thank you. Vera carefully folded the telegram. Family matters being resolved. The sheriff nodded knowingly. Glad to hear it. Frank and I will keep an eye on things here until Garrett returns. He hesitated, then added, William Ramsey sent his foreman and 2 hands to town today, asking questions about Garrett's whereabouts. Thought you should know. After the sheriff departed, Vera found sleep elusive despite Martha's presence in the guest room. She lay awake, one hand resting on the small swell of her belly, the other clutching Garrett's pillow. Your father is the bravest man I know, she whispered to her unborn child. And soon you'll have someone like a sister to help watch over you. The following afternoon, another telegram arrived, this one delivered by Frank Jenkins himself. Judge granted temporary guardianship. Returning tomorrow. Ramsey furious. Stay alert. Love, G. Vera shared the good news with Martha and Frank, who insisted on remaining at the ranch until Garrett's return. As they prepared dinner together, Vera allowed herself to imagine their future Garrett and herself, their child, and now Rebecca, forming a family bound not by blood but by choice and love. The sound of approaching horses interrupted their meal. Frank moved to the window, his expression darkening. It's Ramsey, he reported, with his foreman and those 2 hands. Vera's heart raced. He can't know yet. He's still supposed to be in Phoenix. Maybe he returned early, Martha suggested, her usual composure shaken, or got word somehow. Whatever the reason, he looks mighty determined, Frank observed, and they are armed. Vera rose from the table, one hand protectively covering her belly. He has no right to threaten us in our home. Vera, be careful, Martha cautioned. In his state of mind, rights might not mean much to William Ramsey. Frank moved to the gun cabinet, removing Garrett's rifle. I'll handle this. No, Vera said firmly. This is my home. I'll speak to him. She held up a hand to forestall their protests. But I'd be grateful if you'd both be nearby, Frank with the rifle. When William Ramsey pounded on the door, Vera answered it with all the dignity she could muster, Martha and Frank positioned strategically behind her. Mrs. Holcomb, William greeted her, his cultured voice at odds with the rage in his eyes. Where is your husband, Mr. Ramsey? Vera replied evenly. Garrett is away on business. Is there something I can help you with? Don't play innocent. I know he's taken Rebecca. William stepped closer, forcing Vera to hold her ground. Return her to me immediately and I might be persuaded to show leniency. Rebecca isn't here, Mr. Ramsey, and if she were, she would be here legally. Vera met his gaze steadily. Judge Parker has granted us temporary guardianship while he investigates your management of her inheritance. A flicker of uncertainty crossed William's face, quickly replaced by renewed anger. Impossible. The judge wouldn't dare. He would when presented with evidence of financial malfeasance, Vera replied, and Rebecca's testimony about the marriage you arranged for her. You know nothing about that. We know everything, Mr. Ramsey. The contract with Marcus Whitfield, the systematic draining of Rebecca's trust fund. All of it. For a moment, genuine confusion replaced rage in William's expression. How could you possibly? Understanding dawned. Victoria, my own daughter betrayed me. She protected an innocent child, Vera corrected him, as any decent person would. William's hand moved to his hip where a pistol rested in its holster. Frank stepped forward immediately, rifle raised. I wouldn't, Ramsey, he warned. Not if you want to leave this property alive. For a tense moment, William seemed to consider his options. Then, with visible effort, he regained his composure. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "You have no idea what you've done. The Holcomb name will be mud in this territory when I'm finished." "Your threats don't frighten us, Mr. Ramsey," Vera replied. "Rebecca is safe now, and soon the whole territory will know exactly what kind of man you are." With a final venomous glance, William turned and stalked back to his horse, his men following. As they rode away, Vera sagged against the doorframe, the confrontation having taken more from her than she'd realized. "You did well," Martha said, supporting her to a chair. "But I fear we haven't seen the last of his vengeance." Martha's prediction proved accurate. By morning, rumors were circulating in Cottonwood Springs that Vera had kidnapped Rebecca out of jealousy, that the Holcombs were after the girl's inheritance, even that Rebecca had been harmed. Sheriff Davis reported that William had gathered his most loyal employees and some hired guns, presumably to intercept Garrett and Rebecca on their return journey. "We need to warn them," Vera insisted, pacing the kitchen despite Martha's attempts to make her rest. "Already done," Sheriff Davis assured her. "Sent a rider to meet them with alternate directions. They'll approach from the north, avoiding the main road where Ramsey's men are waiting." The hours of waiting were among the most agonizing of Vera's life. Every sound made her start. Every distant hoofbeat raised hopes that were quickly dashed. By nightfall, with no word from Garrett, her anxiety had reached a fever pitch. "They should have been here by now," she fretted, standing at the window for the 100th time. "Something's gone wrong." "Give them time," Frank counseled. "The northern route is longer, and they might be moving cautiously to avoid detection." It was well past midnight when the sound of horses finally broke the silence. Frank and Sheriff Davis moved to the windows, guns ready, while Martha guided Vera to a safer position away from potential gunfire. "It's Garrett," Frank announced after a tense moment. "With the girl and someone else." Vera rushed to the door despite Martha's protests. In the moonlight, she could make out 3 riders: Garrett, a small figure that must be Rebecca, and a third, unexpected companion. As they dismounted, Vera ran to Garrett, throwing herself into his arms with relief. He held her tightly, his face weary but triumphant. "We made it," he murmured against her hair. "Thanks to an unexpected ally." Vera turned to see Victoria Ramsey helping Rebecca down from her horse. The normally immaculate woman was dusty and disheveled, her riding habit torn in places, but her head was held high. "Victoria?" Vera asked in disbelief. "What are you doing here?" Choosing a side finally, Victoria replied with a tired smile. "When Father discovered my role in exposing his plans, he—" She hesitated, one hand rising unconsciously to her cheek, where a bruise was forming. "Let's just say I'm no longer welcome in the Ramsey household." Rebecca ran to Vera, embracing her with tearful gratitude. "Victoria saved us," she explained breathlessly. "Father's men had found us despite the different route. They were waiting at Miller's Creek. Victoria warned us just in time." Inside, as Martha tended Victoria's bruises and prepared food for the weary travelers, Garrett explained the full story. Judge Parker had indeed granted them temporary guardianship of Rebecca and frozen what remained of her inheritance to prevent further misappropriation. But William, more cunning than they'd anticipated, had somehow deduced their return route and positioned men to intercept them. "We would have ridden right into their trap if Victoria hadn't found us first," Garrett said, his arm around Vera's shoulders. "She risked everything to help us." Victoria, looking smaller and more vulnerable without her usual haughty demeanor, shook her head. "I risked nothing that was truly valuable. Position, wealth, my father's approval, none of that matters if it comes at the cost of one's conscience." She glanced at Rebecca, who was falling asleep at the kitchen table despite her excitement. Some things are worth more than the Ramsey name. Later, after Rebecca and Victoria were settled in the prepared bedrooms, Vera and Garrett stood on their porch, watching the stars and savoring their reunion. "What happens now?" Vera asked, leaning against his solid strength. "William won't give up easily." "No, he won't," Garrett agreed. "But he's fighting a losing battle. Judge Parker is launching a full investigation into his business dealings based on the documents Victoria provided. Several other prominent men in the territory have already withdrawn their support, not wanting to be associated with scandal. And Victoria." "Rebecca," Garrett's arm tightened around her. "Victoria is of age. She can make her own way, though it won't be easy for her. As for Rebecca—" He smiled down at her. "Judge Parker indicated he would look favorably on our petition for permanent guardianship, given the circumstances." Joy bloomed in Vera's heart. "So she'll stay with us, become part of our family, if that's what she wants, and I believe it is." Garrett placed his hand gently on Vera's rounded belly. "This little one will have a big sister to look up to." As they stood together under the vast Arizona sky, Vera reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the despair of that first day at the train depot alone, deceived with no name to call her own, to this. A husband who cherished her, a child growing beneath her heart, a young girl who needed them, and even an unexpected ally in Victoria. "What are you thinking?" Garrett asked, brushing a kiss against her temple. "I'm thinking about names," Vera replied. "How important they are, how they define us." She turned in his arms to face him. "When I stepped off that train with no name to call, no identity here, I thought I'd lost everything. But you looked at me and said you knew my name." "Vera," he murmured, touching her cheek tenderly. "Yes, but it became more than that. You helped me become Vera Holcomb, teacher, wife, mother, guardian." She reached up to trace the beloved contours of his face. "You didn't just know my name. You helped me discover who I truly am." "And who is that?" Garrett asked, his gray eyes reflecting the starlight. Vera smiled, her heart full to overflowing. "Someone who found home where she least expected it. Someone who was left at the depot with nothing but found everything that matters." Their kiss sealed the truth of her words, a promise of all they had built together, and all that lay ahead, as bright and enduring as the stars above the half-moon ranch. Summer flowed into autumn, and as the cottonwoods along the creek turned to gold, Vera gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named James Frank Holcomb, honoring both Garrett's father and the station master who had been their steadfast friend. Rebecca, now officially their ward following Judge Parker's final ruling, took to her role as big sister with enthusiasm, reading to the baby and helping Vera with his care. Victoria, after a brief stay at the Half Moon, had moved to Prescott to work as a companion to Judge Parker's elderly mother, a position that allowed her to maintain her dignity while establishing independence from her father's influence. She visited occasionally, her relationship with Vera evolving into a tentative friendship based on mutual respect. William Ramsey's empire had indeed crumbled under the weight of the scandal and subsequent investigations. Though he maintained ownership of his ranch, his political influence had vanished, and many of his business ventures had collapsed when his partners withdrew their support. He remained a bitter, isolated figure, still occasionally making threats but largely impotent to act on them. On the first anniversary of the day Vera had stepped off the train at Cottonwood Springs Depot, she and Garrett returned to the spot where they had first met. The platform was unchanged, the same weathered boards, the same distant view of mountains, but everything else had transformed. "Hard to believe it's been only a year," Garrett said, holding her close as they stood where fate had first brought them together. Feels like I've known you my whole life. In all the ways that matter you have, Vera replied, watching as Frank Jenkins emerged from the depot office to greet them, his weathered face breaking into a smile of welcome. Well, if it isn't the Holcombs, he called. And with perfect timing, too. Train's due in 5 minutes. As the distant whistle announced the approaching train, Vera leaned her head against Garrett's shoulder, gratitude filling her heart. 1 year ago, she had arrived alone, betrayed with no name to call her own. Today she stood with her husband, their future stretching before them as vast and promising as the Arizona sky. The train pulled into the station, brakes squealing, steam billowing. Among the disembarking passengers was a young woman who stood uncertainly on the platform, a single trunk at her feet, her expression a mixture of hope and trepidation. Frank approached her with the same question he had once asked Vera. "Might as well tell me where you're headed, miss." The young woman's voice trembled slightly. "I'm not certain. I was supposed to meet someone, but—" Vera and Garrett exchanged a glance of perfect understanding. Together they crossed the platform to where the young woman stood, alone and adrift as Vera had once been. "Welcome to Cottonwood Springs," Vera said warmly, extending her hand. "I'm Vera Holcomb, and this is my husband Garrett. Whatever has brought you here, you're not alone anymore." In the young woman's eyes, Vera saw a flicker of the same emotion she had felt 1 year ago, the tentative hope that perhaps, despite everything, this place might become home. And she knew with absolute certainty that the circle was complete, the journey from desperation to belonging now extending to encompass someone new. As they walked together toward town, Vera's hand securely in Garrett's, she smiled at the thought of all that had happened since that fateful day, all the joy and challenge and love that had grown from what had seemed like disaster. She had arrived with no name to call, a stranger in a strange land. But the cowboy had known her name, had helped her discover her true self, and in doing so had given her the greatest gift of all, a place to belong, a love to cherish, and a future to embrace. And that, Vera knew, was worth every step of the journey.